Welcome back to Zakima's Ridge Homestead. In this video, we're going to attempt to replace the transfer case in this '05 Ford Escape. It's making a heck of a lot of noise. It's been bad for a long time. I've actually pushed my luck and put about 300 miles on it with the noises it's making, and I just can't do it anymore. It's a heck of a job. I don't want to try and tackle it, but I don't have a choice at this point. So come along with me. We'll take a look at this thing and see if we can get the transfer case out of it.
Hello, and welcome to our channel. We're glad you're here.
I'm getting ready to pull this Escape in the garage, and I wanted you to ride along so hopefully you can hear this transfer case before I take it out. I think you can probably hear all that banging and popping and clanking. Okay, now that you've heard that transfer case when I pulled it in the garage last night, I'll start by showing you the replacement unit I got from the junkyard and how these things work a little bit. You've got this input cog here. This section here splines into the transmission. The passenger side drive shaft goes in through this hole here and splines into the transmission. There is a seal down in there that seals the drive shaft. I have replaced that seal. There's also a seal down in here that seals the transfer case to the transmission so we don't lose gear oil into the transmission. That's also been replaced. This main gear here drives this little intermediate shaft. Other direction, and then that intermediate shaft drives this gear, which turns the ring gear, which turns the pinion, which is your output of the transfer case. Now these are kind of known for an issue. This bearing and this bearing seat in here on the case, new seal there as well, by the way, and the catalytic converter sits right here underneath the engine. This little, see which way this goes on here, there we go. This little heat shield goes on there to try and keep the heat from that converter away, but it doesn't do a really good job of it. So you basically end up cooking the gear oil out of these two bearings and they just fall apart. So when we take the other one out of the car, we'll take it apart here on the bench at the end of the video and see inside of it, see what it looks like. But we'll put some RTV gray sealant around this lip before we put it back together all the way. There is no gasket for that. And I have not replaced this output seal. These other ones you have to have the transfer case out to change. This one you can do in the vehicle, so if it does leak later I can change it later. But for now, I wanted to change the ones that have to be done. So let's get started on the car. There's two quick things I wanted to mention that I kind of forgot to. One, please bear with the video. I'm doing this in my garage on jack stands, so I've only got about that much clearance under the vehicle. It's hard to get the camera under there to show you what's going on, so I'll do the best I can. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the transfer case on this thing is really relatively light. So if you do this job, it's not that bad. It's not one of those 500-pound new process old style transfer cases. I think this probably weighs, I don't know, 40 pounds or something. It's pretty light. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to explain a lot and not actually show doing the work because it's kind of self-explanatory work how to do. But if I showed doing every step, this video would be 6 hours long. So in here in the wheel well, I've already got the car up on jack stands. I've removed the passenger side front tire. I'm going to take the nut off the end of the drive shaft. the two bolts that hold the strut onto the knuckle, take the caliper loose and hang it up here on the spring out of the way. Once I've got the knuckle and the strut separated, I'll pull those forward and push the drive shaft back out of the bearing, and then I'll take the drive shaft and pop it out of the transmission. And we'll lose some fluid when we do that, so we'll have to make sure we have a pan under there. But once the drive shaft is out, that pretty much finishes us in this wheel well, and then we can go underneath the vehicle and I can show you what we have to do under there. Okay, when removing the drive shaft, it has an intermediate bearing that it hangs on, so you have to go in through the wheel well, and there's two 13mm nuts that hold this onto two studs that come off of a bracket. So once you take those two nuts off, you're able to slide the drive shaft out. But there's the part that goes in the transmission, so it sticks that far in through the transfer case to reach the transmission where it's splined. And like I said, you've got this intermediate bearing hanging there, and there's the part that goes out to the wheel. So you have to take these two nuts off before the drive shaft will come out. All right, now we're underneath the vehicle. We're basically kind of sitting underneath the driver's side seat. Okay, this is the rear drive shaft. We'll have to take these 6 bolts out here. Those are some kind of a Torx head bolt. So we'll have to remove those bolts, pull the little drive shaft back and get it out of the way. This cross member underneath has to come off. There's a couple bolt holes underneath here. I think there's one here and one up here. Each have a bolt in them, so I'll have to take the 2 bolts out of here, the 2 bolts out of the other side, drop this cross member out of the way. This front exhaust pipe has to come out. It's attached here with the catalytic converter, right up in there on the rear exhaust manifold, catalytic converter, and right up there in the front. Now, you maybe see it on the floor over there. I've already purchased a new front pipe because this flex section is shot on this one, so it needs replaced anyway. So that one came with new bolts, so I will come under here with a torch and just cut these bolt heads off and get this out of the way. Take these out, like I said, and remove this cross member. And then the next thing that has to come out is this rear exhaust manifold and catalytic converter, and that's what I'm dreading. So once I get these off, this cross member out, and this exhaust pipe out of the way, I'll bring it back under here and we'll take a look at that exhaust manifold / catalytic converter. Well, at this point, I'm probably 3-4 hours into this job. I didn't bother taking the camera back under there to show you the catalytic converter and stuff because I can't hardly see to get it out of there. So it wasn't going to do me any good to take the camera under there. But the catalytic converter is out. I can now see the transfer case. So I'll take you underneath there, show you what I kind of had to do to get the catalytic converter out of there, and show you what we need to do to get the transfer case out. Okay, I think you can see up in there, there's where the back of the head is at, where the catalytic converter exhaust manifold was bolted to. In order to get to that, this side over here, I had to take the alternator out of the way. Now I can't get the alternator out of the vehicle because this bracket's in the way, and it looks like you have to take part of this frame back here down in order to get it out the hole over there. So that alternator is an absolute nightmare. I do have to take this bracket off, so I'll show you the alternator when I get it out. That black piece up top is like an air duct that goes on the back of the alternator. It was a real treat. Now if I move a little bit here. Sorry about that. If we tip straight back toward the firewall, there's an air tube that goes into the catalytic converter as well. So I had to heat that up and get it to break loose to get that off. That green plug up there is for the the oxygen sensor. So that needs unplugged. Once you get all that out, now it's time to take the transfer case out. I will need to remove this bolt here. That's a breather bolt. There's a tube that runs over top and up for that. this bracket that the alternator is hitting wraps around the top here. So I need to take those two bolts right there out to get to the transfer case bolts. Down here on the bottom, it's hard to see, there's one of the inverted Torx bolts. There's one there, and there's two up top behind that bracket. The three of those bolts have to come out, and then come around to the other side of the transfer case and transmission. If I can find it in the camera. That bolt right there goes into the back side of the transfer case. So that bolt will have to come out as well. So let me get all these bolts out and we should have a transfer case on the floor. Okay, it's out. I'll show it to you in a minute. I wanted to show you these inverted Torx. This was an E14 was the size that it took. Now I've heard you can use an 11 millimeter 6-point on these, but since I had the correct tool, I just went and did it the right way. There's the alternator. It sits up in there, bolted to the back of the engine about like that. And then this is that plastic cover that goes on here about like that. And this piece is actually in the way of getting this bolt out. So it's a real treat to get this alternator out of there. And this vehicle's got 170,000 miles on it, and that's the original alternator to the best of my knowledge. So I'm putting an alternator in it just to be safe because I don't want to go through this again. So let me take you over on the bench. We'll pop this transfer case open and take a look inside of it. I've already taken the bolts out around the edge and popped this loose. So let's take the cover off. Take a look inside at what we got. One thing we've got is a lot of shiny stuff. I'm surprised that these bearings are still here. I thought for sure one of those was going to be ruined. But let's pull some PC parts out. Whoa! Look at those gears. Just missing teeth everywhere. Just shiny, shiny stuff all over the place. Missing all kinds of teeth there. The ring gear's worn real bad. Like I said, I'm shocked the bearings are there. I don't know if you can see in here or not, but we're missing teeth on this pinion gear. Lots of pieces of teeth missing. That's almost worn to where it would slip completely past there. So yeah, I think this transfer case was a little bit worn. Wow. But I am shocked that the bearings are still intact. Even with all this metal shavings in there, they're still there. So yeah, I thought for sure this part of the case was going to be gone. And they're not. So I'm shocked. But quite a bit of shiny stuff in there. It's off my hand. That's just the shavings are just unbelievable in there. I have to admit that probably 4 or 5 years ago, this had a weird noise, had a weird howl to it, and I kept driving it, couldn't think what it was. And after my divorce, my ex kept the vehicle for a while, and then it quit running right for her, and I ended up getting it back. Drove it for, maybe a year or so, and every once in a while I'd get like a crunch noise, and obviously now we see where that noise was coming from. But maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, it really started making a lot of noise, and I parked it. It's been sitting outside here for a year and a half, 2 years. It still runs, it still starts, and it would still move. So I thought, see what will happen. And I ended up driving this to work at least 3 days, which would be 300 miles, because I work 50 miles from here. So I put, like I said, 300 miles on it, plus a couple local trips, I did run it in town, or was going to run it in town a couple weeks ago, and got down to the end of the driveway and it actually locked up and slid a little bit. And then when I started down the road, it was making a horrendous noise. So I pulled it back up and parked it. That night I got on eBay, found that replacement transfer case relatively locally, and picked it up and have been getting the other parts together. I will need to go tomorrow and get an alternator and a exhaust manifold gasket. One of the oxygen sensors needs replaced, and a new belt. And I'll start putting this back together tomorrow. I'll put the transfer case in it tonight, but I won't put the other stuff in until I get the alternator in there, because that'll be first. But hope this shows you the importance of checking the fluid in your transfer case if you have a Ford Explorer, or a Ford Escape, sorry. Because if I'd have checked that fluid 5 years ago when I was getting that funny howling noise, I'd have probably cured this. The banjo bolt that holds the vent tube on, I took out with my hands. I guess this is a notorious issue with these. This bolt backs off. It does not have the crush washers like a brake line does. It just seats on the vent tube, and apparently these back loose and will leak. I don't know if I leaked all the fluid out through this hole or not, but fluid went somewhere. The fluid that's in there now I put in before I started driving it a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty dry at that point in time. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. If you shop Amazon, which we all do, we do have an Amazon affiliate link down below. If you can click on that, it'll take you straight to Amazon. The channel gets a little bit of kickback, and it doesn't cost you a cent more. So, thanks for watching our video. Have a good night.